Is Britain a racist country? If you watch the news or read social media, there's a lot of evidence that suggests it might be. The racist murderer Stephen Lawrence is back in the headlines. London's Met Police has been branded institutionally racist. An exhibition at St Paul's Cathedral branded Sir Winston Churchill, one of our great national heroes, a white supremacist. And a shocking new report today declared that cricket, that most English of indulgences, is elitist, misogynist and institutionally racist. An independent commission found that racism is entrenched in the sport and that players at all levels of the game face discrimination because of their class and their skin colour. If you're not white, male and wealthy, it seems you're not welcome in that great English game. Now, for the many people who love cricket, myself included, it's literally my favourite sport in the world. I'll be in residence at Lord's this week for the Ashes. This report makes unsettling reading. But it's also not really the sport that I recognise, or many of the people that I play cricket with recognise. From fans in the stands to players on the pitch, most of the people I've ever encountered in cricket are not racist or sexist. But indisputably, this report affirms that this is going on. Attitudes have changed as the times have changed, and that's indisputable too. I think that's how a lot of people feel when they see headlines like this. There are problems in our society, yes, but there has been massive progress too. Last week we marked the 75th anniversary of an event that changed the country. 492 people stepped off the Empire Windrush from the Caribbean into the gloomy grey swirls of Britain. They were the pioneers, the first in a wave of new arrivals over a period of decades who became the Windrush generation. Britain invited people from across the former empire to fill labour shortages and rebuild our battered economy after the war. And they did just that. They became factory workers, drivers, plumbers, builders, cleaners, nurses in the brand new NHS. They changed the face of this country and they changed it for the better. But it wasn't all a fairy tale. Along with the bad food and worse weather, these people faced a very hostile reception from many. They were ostracised, bullied and abused. They faced Keep Britain White signs, Enoch Powell's Rivers of Blood speech. There were race-hate riots by the Teddy Boys in Nottingham and London. It was a racist country for many of those who came over in the Windrush generation. But three-quarters of a century later, and Britain, well, frankly, is unrecognisable to those times. I don't think most people in this country now care about skin colour. They care about equality and tolerance. 1 in 6 Britons has a parent born abroad now. There are more black and ethnic minority people in top government jobs here than in the whole of the European Union put together. We've opened our doors to massive numbers of Ukrainian refugees. The First Minister of Scotland is Muslim. Half of the England football team is black. It's not even a topic of conversation. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, is a proudly practising Hindu from East African and Punjabi descent. And when he got the top job, that fact was really barely a footnote. It didn't stop the usual suspects queuing up with pre-written hot takes like this.
There's a part of me that feels a little bad for England's racists. No, because remember, they voted for Brexit specifically to keep Britain white. And that vote started a 7-year chain of dominoes that has now led directly to an Indian Prime Minister.
Yeah, that was complete nonsense by Trevor Noah, who actually left his show quite recently. No flowers need to be sent. Nobody cared, or does care, that Rishi Sunak isn't white. If it was mentioned at all, it was to celebrate the fact we had our first non-white Prime Minister. But people didn't make a big deal of that either. The exact same can be said of our old friends Harry and Meghan, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. They've done more than anyone to spin an alternative reality in which Meghan was hounded out of a vile, racist country by a cruel, racist royal family. But they didn't produce any evidence for that, and still haven't. And the reality to me is that we eulogised the newly biracial monarchy as the fresh face of 21st century Britain. I wrote newspaper columns about it myself. What a breath of fresh air this was. Nobody will argue there isn't racism in Britain today, and there isn't a lot of work still to do. But the fact that Britain is one of the most diverse, welcoming and tolerant countries in the world is something to be proud of. The public fury with the Conservative government over the wrongful deportation of some of the Windrush generation is, to me, more proof of that. It may be fashionable to say Britain is racist, but in my view, it is fundamentally wrong. Well, joining me now is broadcaster Sir Trevor Phillips, who's re-released and updated his book, Windrush, 75 Years of Modern Britain. Also in the studio, Talk TV's Paula Roan, Adrian and Richard Tice. Right, there's a lot to unpack here, Sir Trevor. You are probably the most qualified man in the country to unpack it with me. So let me just start with that simple question. Is Britain a racist country?
Well, as much as it pains me to agree with you about anything, Piers, I think actually I reach the same conclusion as you do. When you ask the question, is Britain a racist country, the first thing is to ask, compared to what? Compared to the days when my parents came here with their then 9 children, I was the 10th born here, and when my father said that he would have to walk the streets at night looking for somewhere to sleep, or when we lived in 2 rooms, no chance of black people getting council houses then, because council tenants wouldn't have us on the estates, so we lived in Rackman slums. In our family's case, 2 rooms, black family upstairs, black family downstairs. That's why I was sent back to the Caribbean, because you can't get 12 people into 2 rooms very conveniently. Or compared to when I had my first girlfriend at university, and in order to meet her mother, we had to meet in Selfridges because her mother couldn't tell her father that his daughter was dating somebody black. So I think when people say, oh, it's terrible racist, just talk to your parents or to talk to your grandparents. Now, that doesn't mean we're perfect, but if you survey people now, and the think tank British Future did this a couple of weeks ago, 80% of people from ethnic minorities will tell you that compared to anywhere on the continent, and by the way, compared to the United States, this is a better place to live if you are not white than anywhere else in the developed world.
I walk up and down my local high street maybe a couple of times a day. It just seems unbelievably multicultural, London. I mean, I don't venture north a lot. When I do, it doesn't feel a lot different, actually, when I go to Manchester or places like that. It just feels like we live in an incredibly tolerant, multicultural environment now. I think there are racists in Britain, no question, as there are in every country. But my God, we've come a long way, I think, from that environment your parents had to come to.
Yeah, I mean, let's steady on a bit. I mean, the fact that there are many racists in this country, that doesn't make us a racist nation. But that doesn't mean that we don't have problems. We don't have a situation where people who look like me know that when they go for a job, people will smile at them and be very lovely to them. And as soon as they walk out the door, say, oh, not going to have that one, because they won't fit.
Let me give you an example.
There are all sorts of reasons.
Let me give you an example. I remember watching players like Luther Blissett, one of the first black footballers, then John Barnes and others. I remember the monkey chants from the terraces. I remember the bananas being thrown on, not how they remember it. They were on the receiving end. But I remember watching it. And you would never see that in an English professional game now. I mean, this is unheard of. You hear about it in Spain still, and countries like that, but not here. And I was really struck by, for example, the taking the knee, the George Floyd thing. It was divisive and controversial for many people. But I got to say, at Arsenal, for example, very multicultural crowd, a lot of black players, Bukayo Saka and others. It was always, they did it for the whole time that it went on for that whole season. It was immaculately heard by the home and away crowds. I never heard a single boo. Now, I don't think that would have happened even 20 years ago.
I think that is true. And, you know, and Arsenal is a sort of very polite, nice club. I mean, not a winning club, but a very nice club. If you went to Chelsea, which is has been my club for more than half a century, when I was a student, I stopped going.
Because of the racism?
Yeah, because they were throwing darts. And I was like the bullseye in the dartboard.
Right.
So I stopped going for a long time. But today, you wouldn't get any of that in Chelsea. In fact...
Well, you've had the occasional, but when it happens, it becomes a big story.
Exactly. It's nothing like the old days when we had, you know, the headhunters and all that business. Today, our heroes are Didier Drogba, Kante. I mean, this is the country itself has changed. And by the way, those people that you saw coming down the gangplank from Windrush, they were the people who changed things.